The next topic is about people saying that the expanded universe was a mess, and I guess is a mess. The first thing I'd ask is, have you actually read the expanded universe? You can grab the Star Wars Essential Reader's Companion, which is written by Pablo Hidalgo, and see how well everything connects inside of the book. Even just the source book, it's a really handy one. And this is why I'm such a big Star Wars EU fan. Everything is collected into a singular continuity across multiple forms of media that all work together with hardly any continuity errors. Also, the Canon tiers and the retcons that they made when they absolutely had to retcon it helped abolish most continuity errors that people bring up, or I should say contradictions, because contradictions are seeing things from different points of view, whereas continuity errors are when they actually don't line up at all. So there's some contradictions, but contradictions aren't a bad thing. It's continuity errors that are a bad thing. So I'd also ask, what ideas don't you like about the expanded universe? Because this sort of ties into why people say it was a mess, because they didn't like some of the ideas. And the ones I hear the most about are the Yuuzhan Vong and the clones around the post-Return of the Jedi material with Luke, with 2 U's, which are quite subjective, to be honest. And that doesn't mean that it was a mess, it's just that you didn't like the idea, which is fine. Everyone has their opinion. But I remember reading that Luke was only written with 2 U's, so that when you're reading it, you can actually tell which was which. Can you imagine just being so confused that Luke swung at Luke and then Luke dodged? Which Luke dodged and which Luke swung? Whereas if you said Luke swung at Luke and then Luke dodged, it makes more sense when you're actually reading. So I'm defending that point there, because that makes sense to me. And one of the great things with Star Wars was never rebooted before. They didn't have a need for a reboot. DC and Marvel reboot a lot. Star Trek doesn't even keep their novels and stuff within the same universe. Star Wars, until April 25th of 2014, never needed a reboot. It's something that really made Star Wars unique to me, and why I loved it so much as well, is that there's one storyline. I'd also say the books enrich the storyline of the movies and the characters so much, where it makes it better to rewatch all the movies so much. Without the EU, I wouldn't watch the movies as often as I do now. I would probably have them in the shelf, and maybe once in a while. But I wouldn't have as deep a love for Star Wars. I wouldn't have started a YouTube channel about Star Wars if it wasn't for the EU. That's how much I love it. The importance of why I love the EU is its continuity between all forms of media. Star Wars was unique. No other franchise had or has now had the same level of continuity that the EU has still. It's still got its continuity within itself. I've heard a lot about other franchises not having the same level of continuity as Star Wars did, because I've heard from people that talking about the EU, but how they got into it and that. For example, Matt Wilkins, who's a big EU dude on YouTube, he's read the Star Trek novels and stuff, and said that what drew him to Star Wars was that it was all the same continuity, same canon. And that's what really draws me to it. And Sue Rastoni, in Insider 23, in fall or autumn of 1994, also said, A great deal of attention and care has been put into fleshing out the Star Wars universe because fans are sophisticated and demand a cohesive approach. The Star Wars universe is unique in each story builds upon the last and leads into the next. And that's something where I think they're really thinking about the fans. And when science fiction fans go into something, they analyse and look at the details. And they want it to be some sophisticated rather than simplistic stories, because you can get simplistic stories from any other franchise. And we demand a cohesive approach because, personally, at least this is my opinion, you want it to all line up. You want it to be great. You want it to have great continuity and to not have continuity errors. So, I agree with that. I want my stories to be sophisticated rather than retreading the same simplistic plots that other stories do. It's great. Now, I will say one point about the new canon, and that people compare the EU to the new canon as far as continuity. And I don't have a problem with people liking the new canon. That's fine. I personally don't enjoy the stories as much. I gave them a shot. So on and so forth. But some people say that the new canon has perfect continuity, which, spoiler alert, it doesn't. I've got a good friend that actually reading through it all, and he's told me about things, and I compiled a bit of a list. It might be outdated by now, but compiled a bit of a list of a heap of continuity errors that the new canon has. The EU, I'm going through and noting down any as I read it, but at the moment the EU doesn't have as many because of the canon tier system and the retcons that were made. They don't have as many continuity errors. But don't need to harp on that too much. Just in comparison, don't try and claim that one has better continuity than the other, because that's not true. Neither universe, the EU is not perfect, but it's the best it could be. And the EU with its continuity was so popular because science fiction fans generally have an absurd attention to detail, which I find I do myself. If you can tell from the way I do my EU reviews, this level of detail in the blend of genres in Star Wars, because Star Wars is a space opera. But you got to remember, space opera is a subgenre of science fiction. Think about that. And why it's a space opera is George Lucas originally wanted to buy Flash Gordon, and then he couldn't, and so he created Star Wars, and so he wanted to make something similar. The space opera genre evolved with Star Wars, really. But yeah, it's a subgenre of science fiction, so why shouldn't fans get the same level of detail as other science fiction shows, but in its own way, because it's a separate genre, of course. I know a couple of quotes here. One from Leland Shee on StarWars.com on July 20th, 2012. Everything outside of the films was collectively known as the expanded universe, serving as an extension of the same universe as the films. If anything happened in a book or a comic, it could potentially affect everything else happening in the universe. Any discrepancies that resulted would be resolved or retconned, short for retroactive continuity, i.e. changes from previously established continuity across the board to try and create some consistency. So what that tells me with retcons is that they actually cared about the continuity to clear it up. Good example, Boba Fett. In the older books, he was a character named Jason Muriel until he changed his name. But with the retcon, when you read back on it, it's a contradiction but not a continuity error. Because from the point of view of the book, it's saying that Boba thought of himself as Jason Muriel, but later on we know that he is Boba Fett, but he changed his name to Jason Muriel to hide that he was a clone. So it's really cool. Leland Shee also said in StarWars.com on January in 2005, parallel universes suggests that each universe can go in separate directions, which really isn't the case in regard to the EU. The EU is bound by what is seen in the most current version of the films and any directives from George Lucas. So there you go. That could be in the George Lucas cared part, but because they've got directives from George Lucas, but the EU is bound into the same universe as the movies. It doesn't go, I'm going to do something completely different. And yeah, so the main thing is read the EU. You'll notice that there's so much interconnectivity. The only time I'd say the people have a valid point with it being a mess is with the Clone Wars 2008 series. And that's only really left as a mess because when they decided to reboot, they stopped caring about trying to retcon it to help line up. And they would have worked something out, even though not as many people still would have liked accepting the retcons and that. It still would have worked out to have good continuity with that. So, as I said, the EU isn't really a mess if you really look into it properly, but it does require the level of research just to Google something quickly if you really need to look it up to understand the canon tiers or if there was a retcon. Of course, there's always explaining things in your own way as well, but I'm not going to venture into the realms of headcanon in this video. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, watching, and listening to what I have to say about the EU not really being a mess. And you'll notice as well, as I go through my EU reviews, that I'll point out connections and things as well that I notice. Thanks so much. You're all awesome and breathtaking. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.